In this video, I want to talk about my 4 favorite investments I've ever done. I'm going to walk you through them. I'm going to show you how I found them, how I funded them, what they look like when the project was done, what they look like now, and my lessons learned from each. Number 4 is the most recent, and it's the best deal I'll probably ever do. For those of you that are new to this channel, my name is Sam. I go by @SamFasterFreedom on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram. I have a house flipping company that flipped 252 houses in 2021, mostly wholesales with some fix and flips. I also own a $40 million rental portfolio that I've been able to buy without using any of my own money. So the guy talking with this background knows real estate, and I'm here to help you understand it better as well. Also, stay tuned to the end to hear Maisie's joke of the day. This one's a doozy. If you want me to make a video about my worst investments I've ever done, comment in the comment section. All right, number 1. Gotta be my first investment, right? Of course it is. This is my very first house I bought, and I want to showcase this one to show you what I learned at the very beginning of my real estate investing career. I'm gonna go over what the numbers were when I did the project and what they are 7 years later. This was a simple 3-bed, 1.5, 900 square foot house. I bought it in 2015. I actually bought it off the MLS. It was a pre-foreclosure. Back then, you know, 7 years ago, you could find deals on the MLS and you could find pre-foreclosures much easier. The competition was not near as fierce and there were way more properties to pick from. I ended up buying it for $75,000 and I put about 25 grand into it. So when it was all said and done, I had $100,000 in it. It was worth $125,000, so I had that 80% equity, and I was renting it and cash flowing about $200 a month. Interesting thing about this one, my plan was to fix it up, sell it, and take the profit and put 20% down on a rental property. I did not know about the refinance, the BRRRR method, any of that when I got started. I thought buy a house, fix it up, take the profit, and put 20% down on a rental property. My goal was to buy rentals, and I thought I was gonna have to buy 2 houses for every rental I bought. One to flip, no middle finger, and the other to actually put 20% down and keep as a rental. Let's talk about the lessons learned, and then we're gonna get into the best part, which is you're gonna see a real example of the power of real estate over 7 short years. I learned a lot about rehabbing. Like most people, and what I suggest doing is do as much as you can. If time allows and your skill set allows, do as much as you can. On this project, I remember tearing up the floors. We did some painting. We tore out the kitchen cabinets. We did some landscaping work, cut down some trees. I remember digging trenches so the drains would drain away from the house, the gutters would drain away from the house. So we did quite a bit of work on this. We probably put 40 grand into it, but it only cost us 25 because Lucas, my business partner, and I, this guy, did as much as we could. So I learned a lot about the process. I was at the house all the time. I saw the other contractors, you know, the one that actually laid the floors, the one that hung the kitchen cabinets, the one that put the countertops in, all like the kind of technical things that I didn't want to do or wasn't good enough at doing. I saw them do that because I was there all the time. Lucas and I were there for 10, 20 hours a weekend, every single weekend for probably 4 or 5 months getting this project done. It took a long time, but I learned a lot about rehabbing and how the process should go. The other thing I loved about this deal was I established some relationships on this deal that I still have today. And this will come full circle on the 4th deal I'm going to show you, the best one ever. I developed a relationship with my main private lender on this deal. He lent me the money to buy and fix up this house. This was my very first deal and his very first deal. We've probably done 50 since then. I also developed relationships with some small local banks I still work with. And one of the contractors we used, Brian, ended up being with us for the next 6 years. He recently went off on his own, but we used him on our very first project. And after that, we started to use him more, and he actually became one of our employees for a few years. So we made a lot of relationships that lasted for a long time and continued to last on our first deal. The most important thing I learned on this deal, however, was the BRRRR method, and I learned about the refinance step. I learned that you do not have to put 20% down on every rental property you buy, and you can use other people's money and banks and the refinance process to buy as many rental properties as you want without using any of your own money. I have a ton of YouTube videos on that. I'm going to show you one at the very end. All right, let's go over the numbers quickly and then we'll move on to number 2. As I stated earlier, in 2015, the property was worth $125,000 and I owed $100,000 on it. So I had 25 grand in equity. Granted, the market's been great over the past 7 years, but this is what the property's worth today. Today, the property's worth about $200,000 and I owe about $75,000. So that $25,000 in equity turned into $125,000 in equity in just 7 years. The property went up in value and the mortgage got paid down by the tenant, and that equity grew grew over 7 short years. Imagine doing this over 10, 20, 30, or 100 properties. The numbers get big really quickly. I also collected on average over the past 7 years, $200 a month, so I got decent cash flow as well. Number 2, our first apartment complex. This was a 32-unit apartment complex that we bought, and this one was interesting. To give you a little context, we were forced to evict 18 of the 32 tenants in the first few months of owning it. That was not by choice, we pretty much had to. This property was a 32 unit. It was 2 16-unit buildings side by side. We bought this in 2018 and we got the lead from an apartment complex broker. We had been spending a few years trying to get into the multifamily game. We didn't have the funding, we didn't have the banking, we didn't have the deals. But eventually we got this deal, and it was a pretty hairy one, which looking back is probably the reason why we ended up getting it. It was a rough building. Now the area was decent. It wasn't a bad area. It wasn't a great area. It was kind of that mid, maybe C plus, B minus area, a decent area, but this building was not decent. It had a lot of really bad tenants, and not all tenants are bad. I'm not one of those landlords that says, put your thumb on your tenant, tenants are bad. I love our tenants are great. This did not have good tenants. The property was rough. This was actually within 5 blocks of the police station of this municipality, and still the police were called there multiple times a week. I think after talking to the police, they said they were there at least 5 times a week dealing with drugs or domestic violence or just general issues. As I stated earlier, we took over and we told our tenants to pay us. We weren't accepting cash. We just kind of set some guidelines, and tenants did not do that. They were not taking care of the property. So unfortunately, we had to evict 18 of those 32 tenants in the first few months of owning it. If you'd like me to do a detailed video on this project, I can do that as well. All right, let's go over some numbers and then lessons learned. We ended up buying the property for $1.1 million. We put 20% down. We actually used our private money lender that we used on our very first property 3 years prior, the one I just went over. He gave us the 20% down for this property. Don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but he got partial ownership in the property for that 20%. He got a little bit of cash flow. Then we ended up giving him his money back plus interest with a refinance a few years later in 2020, just like a Burrs deal, but with an apartment complex over 2 years. I learned 2 pretty important lessons on this deal. The first one was how to turn around an apartment complex that was a mess. This thing was a nightmare, but it was well worth it. We took all the cash flow we got from it to repair the units. We took a little extra money from our private lender. We didn't have to come out of pocket at all, but we ended up turning the building around. It took a few years, maybe like 12 to 18 months to really get some traction, but then not overnight, the building was a great place to live. We talked to the police department and they said they're there once a month at maximum for minor issues. It was really rewarding for us to take a distressed property that was an eyesore, that was bad for the community, bad for that local area, and turn it around. Now it's a beautiful building that's a cash flow beast, and we have amazing tenants in there that are safe, and we're providing safe housing and a safe area for people to live. Power of multifamilies and the power of forcing appreciation. I'm going to quickly explain that, but you really see what I mean when I talk about what the building's worth now. Multifamily properties' values are based on the income that they produce. So if you can increase that income, then the value of that building is going to go up. It's not like single-family rental properties where your house is worth what the houses around it are worth. Multifamilies don't play like that. Multifamily's worth is based on the income that they produce. So if I can increase the income by getting rents to market rent and decrease the expenses by being more efficient and taking care of the tenants, I can really increase that income and therefore increase the value of the building. So I am forcing that appreciation. I am forcing that value increase by doing things that I can control, not something external like the market, which controls the values of single family houses. My third favorite investment, still watching, give this video a like. Number 3 is the building I am recording this in. I am in the studio of this building that I built. This is a 24,000 square foot office building that me and a couple partners went in on in 2021. We bought this vacant 24,000 square foot commercial office building. There was a surgery center upstairs and a few medical things, but overall it was vacant. Unfortunately, the doctor who owned the practice passed away, and this thing had been sitting on the market for a couple years. Ever since the pandemic, people are kind of shying away from office buildings. That's why I think this one kind of remained vacant, and it needed a lot of work to get fixed up. But my businesses and a couple of our partners' businesses businesses needed to all be under one roof. So under this roof of this office building, and then I'll go over the numbers, there's an event center where we hold our monthly meetup, and I hold boot camps for the education brand. There is a flipping company that flips 250 houses a year. There's a traditional brokerage that has 70 agents that sell retail real estate. There is a title company that does all of our workforce. There's a co-working space for people to work and other wholesalers and other people in the industry like insurance agents and lawyers to rent office space. There is a lending company that has almost $20 million on the street. There's a couple different property management companies, and there's this Faster Freedom real estate education brand. So as you can see, that's a meld of 5 or 6 different companies that were all spread out in different buildings around the St. Louis area. We all wanted to get under one roof, and we wanted to have somewhere to host our monthly meetup, so we didn't have to rent space every single month. So we were able to accomplish that by all partnering up and buying this building and fixing it up. This one's so recent that we just got it appraised. So before I go over what we bought it for, what we fixed it up, and what it's worth, I want to talk about some lessons learned. Number one is it's pretty cool to have an office building and own a 24,000 square foot office building. All our companies are working so much better together by being under the same roof and being able to go over to somebody's office or go over to somebody's work area and have a conversation rather than get on the phone or Zoom or email. Things get done so much quicker and so much more efficiently, all being together. I also learned that when you partner with the right people, you don't have to do a ton. I did very little on this project. We ended up putting over $1 million into this rehab. You'll see by the pictures, this building looks awesome, but I did very little. I helped pick out a few things. Other than that, the other partners kind of pulled their weight, the contractor did their work, and I didn't really have to do very much, and now I'm part owner of this amazing office building. Let's go over the numbers, and then we're gonna get to number 4, which is the best. We bought this building for about $2 million, and as I said, we put in a little over $1 million. The bank financed the entire rehab, and they financed 85% of the purchase price. So us partners had to split up, there's 5 of us, had to split up the 50% down payment, so it wasn't too bad. We bought it for $2 million, we put $1 million into it, and it appraised way low, but it appraised for $3.6 million. It's probably worth a little over $4 million if you actually ran the numbers now today after getting everything rented. But there's a little bit of equity, or a decent amount of equity, and we have a building that we all live in and function better together. Number 4, by far my favorite and the best deal I'll probably ever buy. Before I show you number 4, I want to let you know I'm going to give you a bonus investment. This is an investment that I have that I rarely ever talk about. It's completely passive for me, but it's probably the coolest bragging right investment that I have. Before I get to that, let's talk about number 4. Number 4, and you're gonna hear a lot about this over the next few months with my content, is the 42 pack of houses I'm buying. I am buying, or I closed on it last week, 42 houses all in the same neighborhood. I bought it from a tired landlord who had been acquiring them over the past 30 years. He's your old school landlord. You know, everything was written leases, there was no emails, there's no texting. He's super old school. He does everything himself. He manages them, collects rent, does the maintenance, and he had been doing it for a while. And over the past 30 years had, bought these properties 1 or 2 at a time, or chunks of properties, and acquired 42 of them in a neighborhood with about 100 houses, maybe a little bit more. So he owned a large portion of the neighborhood, and he was ready to get out of it. The deal worked out really well for him and incredible for us. The numbers are going to blow your mind. All these houses in the neighborhood are all very simple. They're all slabs. They're all, 3 or 4 bedroom and 1 or 2 baths. So they're very simple builds. They were all built in the 1950s and 1960s. I don't know if they were built for a specific purpose, like the military or something, but they're all the same house, or pretty much the same house. So that's great. They're all simple. They're all clean. They are in a extremely up and coming area in the outskirts of St. Louis. They are in western St. Charles County, so outside of St. Louis County, but it is a great area. It's blown up recently, and these are kind of like the eyesore of the area of the city. They're not horrible by any means, but you'll see what I bought them for. They're extremely cheap, and this is not a cheap area. This is a great area. We were able to get such a good deal because we were buying so many at one time, and not that many people could afford to buy that money at one time. And the real reason we bought it, we only got in 5 houses before we fully committed to the deal. I trusted the owner. We developed some rapport together, and he said, I'm going to bring in 5 houses. These are kind of average condition for the houses that I own in this neighborhood. So what we ended up doing was walking those 5 houses. I was kind of surprised at how good of shape they were actually in. And I was like, are all the, in general, is this the shape of the houses? And he said yes. So we ended up committing and putting $50,000 of earnest money, non-refundable, down after just looking at 5 houses. So we could have backed out after we got into some of the other houses, but we were lost the 50 grand, and we have still yet to get in every single house. Some of the houses we couldn't get in. So the fact that we're willing to take some risk, the fact that we had the funding and the property management to back it up, we were able to take this incredible deal down. We ended up buying it for $3.5 million, or about $83,000 a door. I'm gonna go over it, what just recently appraised for and what it's gonna appraise for in a couple years, but that's a really good deal. Spoiler alert. We ended up using, surprise, surprise, a private lender for the 20% down payment, and the rest we funded with the bank. Our plan is to fix up the properties over the next 2 years, increase the value like crazy, and then refinance out and pay back our private lender. Again, a long-term BRRRR deal. If you haven't figured out, I love the BRRRRs. It's what's got me my $40 million rental portfolio that has $25 million worth of mortgages on it, all without using any of my own money. So I'm growing massive wealth and not over leveraging. There's equity, there's cash flow, all of it, if you know how to properly utilize the BRRRRs method. All right, let's go over the numbers, then let's get to the bonus, and then Maisie's joke. As I stated earlier, we bought it for $3.5 million, or about $83,000 a door. It appraised as is for $5.3 million, or about $125,000 a door. So we got $1.8 million in equity off the bat. And I think they're probably worth a little more than that. But our plan is to put about $500,000 into them over the next 2 years. I'm very confident they'll appraise for at least $175,000. So they should appraise for well over $7 million. So they will be worth $7 million. Even with the 500 grand I'm putting in, we'll have about 4 million into it. So we're gonna go from 1.8 million equity at the beginning, which is incredible, to over $3 million in equity all in 2 years. And we're going to cash flow a lot, because the average rent this guy was asking was like $800 or a little bit less a month. The market rent's like $1,200. So we're not gonna jump to that overnight, but we're going to increase rent as we fix these units up and cash flow a lot, as well as create a ton of equity. Like I said, this deal is a slam dunk, grand slam, home run, hole in one. All right, on to the bonus investment. I don't talk about this one a ton because it's completely passive for me, and I'm a pretty small owner, but I do have ownership percentage in a winery out in the Defiance, Augusta area of St. Louis. It's kind of like the Midwest version of, well, not Napa Valley, but it's got a lot of wineries out there. So I'm part owner of a winery out there. It's really fun to go out there and go to meetings and be able to go out there and drink wine and have fun and see the investment. So that was kind of a for fun investment, but it's pretty cool. All right, here's Maisie's joke of the day. How do you make a Kleenex dance? You put a little boogie in it. Check out this video over here where I go over a real life example case study before and after, HGTV style, where I show you the house before it's fixed up and after it's fixed up, and talk about the numbers and show you exactly how to buy rental property without using any of your own money. It's a good video.